And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming today and talking with us all and giving us all such inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. My honor. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Although Kathy Bates and I met only 5 years ago, I struggle at wondering where to begin at introducing her legacy. It is not unusual for celebrities to talk about a disease. However, it is exceedingly rare that one embraces a disease so wholly that they play a singular role in driving a movement. As I thought about it, only a few celebrities come to mind whose achievements in overcoming a disease turned out to be as significant as their achievement in the arts. Liz Taylor, AIDS, AMFAR. Marlo Thomas, Children's Diseases and St. Jude's. Michael J. Fox and the Michael J. Fox Foundation, focused on Parkinson's disease. Oh, and one more, Kathy Bates and the fight against lymphedema and lymphatic diseases. It is my honor to introduce to you Academy Award-winning actor and LE&RN spokesperson, Ms. Kathy Bates.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all of you for being here today. It's just such an honor. And I know Bill and Dr. Roxon and all of our LE&RN members, the Lymphatic Education and Research Network, and my dear friends. Can you find a seat back there, you guys? Okay. I have got 3 wonderful friends who are with me today, my little family. We're all excited to have the opportunity to speak with you. I'm a little verklempt because we were upstairs talking with Dr. Chaikoff and Bernie Lee, I call him Bernie now, and Sumner and Ron Jones, and it was quite an education for me and such an honor to be in the company of people who are actually doing something physically to help us and have the education and the sensibility and the heart and the passion behind doing something such as what we are dealing with and is such a serious disease. I want to thank the program committee, especially Dr. Dhruv Singhal. I loved meeting you today and hearing you speak about your journey. And it's like I said to Bernie, I have a niece who's now 18, but when she was a toddler, she said, "I feel to cry." And that's how I feel after meeting with you guys today and hearing all of the progress that you've been making. And the fact that this is the 2nd year, Teresa, is just phenomenal. And I'm so pleased to be here. Advancements in treatment of lymphatic disease are dependent on those pioneers who commit themselves to the study. And so I want to thank those pioneers, Harvard Medical School Dean George Daly, for spending time discussing how we're going to work on incorporating lymphatic diseases in the curriculum. Actually, George, I didn't see you there today, so you and I do have to discuss about the curriculum. So I want to make sure that I get a tooth around your ankle before I leave today. Because obviously Harvard Medical School has always been at the forefront of medical care and innovation. And I have hope that with Harvard leading the way, others will follow suit. I also want to thank BIDMC Chief of Surgery, Dr. Elliot Chaikoff, and previous current chiefs of plastic and reconstructive surgery, Dr. Bernard Lee and my BFF Sumner, Dr. Slavin. I'm very excited about the fact that they are building a world-class lymphatic center where Hey, how are you? It's so good to see you here. Awesome. Okay, sorry. Where they're going to do the whole thing, you know, from around. It's going to be multidisciplinary. Wouldn't that be great? My heart be still. So when Bill asked me first, many years ago, 5.5, 6 years ago, to become the national spokesperson for LE&RN, he told me about the millions of people who suffer from lymphatic disease and lymphedema, and that many doctors aren't equipped enough to talk about the lymphatic system at all. My jaw dropped. I had never been involved in any advocacy work before, and I was telling those guys today, you know, celebrities are asked a lot of times, you just want to put you on our committee, it's an honorary board, you don't have to do anything. You know, and it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to lend my name to something that I don't know anything about or that I'm not passionate about. I mean, what is that? It's nothing. So this was the first time that I really felt passionate, and I thought, when you gave me those figures, I thought, this is so unfair. Okay, let's ring up the AMA. Let's send out an email blast. I'm surprised you never thought of that, and we're going to clear that up just like that. Okay? Took us a while for me to get my tooth around James Madara's ankle. We had a lovely lunch with him, but sadly to say, he was not able to do anything to help us. Other than my own experience, I knew absolutely nothing about lymphedema. And I had no idea if I could stay the course or make any difference at all. And I knew right away that I wanted to get the doctors to open their eyes and to understand how serious this is. And it was a relief to learn later that researchers have been doing research for about the last 10 or 15 years. I spoke with Mihaela Scobie-Crosby, and it was so interesting to hear her talk about the work that she's been doing. But it often seems like we're trying to climb Mount Everest. And I told the guys upstairs, I feel like we've just made it to base camp. And we couldn't have done that without the support of you and all of your stories that you've sent us. And so I want to thank you for that. I'm indebted to Bill for his years of hard work, and most recently, with the New York State Legislature, I have to thank Assemblywoman Linda B. Rosenthal and State Senator Martin J. Golden and their staffers. We got Governor Andrew Cuomo. God, I better get that right. He might be president someday. Cuomo. Okay, so it took a while, but we got him to sign LE&RN's bill, and that means that all the patients in New York State have to be given a packet of information about lymphedema. Everybody who's at risk, any cancer patients, you name it. And so finally we got that done. And now we have to thank Cuomo and his counsel, Alfonso David, because they are now continuing to work with Bill on our next bill, no pun intended, which is money for research. And that's a bill that's been there for a long time, ever since Emma Detlefsen, who at the age of 6, I think, visited the New York State Legislature in her pretty purple dress and impressed all of them. And one of them was heard to say, we have to do something to help these children. They have to do something to help all of us. Cuomo is setting a fine example for the rest of the nation's governors, and I hope that whoever is the next governor of the great state of Massachusetts is listening today. I got to just say one more thing about Bill. He's indefatigable. He never gives up, never. Both here at home and globe-trotting to every seminar and conference on the planet, he has created LE&RN chapters in 13 US states and more than 8 countries such as India, Egypt, Australia, Israel, Taiwan. And I'm sure Bill filled you in on all of this morning, but I had to just say all that because you're my hero, okay? recently, I'm not going to go into the details about this, but I was blowing my stack about something, and Bill always keeps me on point. You know, he calms me down, and I just, because, you know, I'm Irish. My family is the Doyle family. We didn't have the hotels. We get in the punch-ups, you know. But this is helping me in my work today, right? Okay. And then finally, I have to thank the physical therapists, the clinicians, the researchers, even the companies who are making better compression garments and pumps, which we need until we find a cure. And those unsung heroes unsung heroes who donate their time to update LE&RN's website, which enables us to reach around the globe and to create organize our events, our 5Ks, make our videos. And while we were lobbying Congress on Capitol Hill last year, I got to know Dr. Joe Diane, who was doing node transplant surgery at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and he told me that the work we are doing at LE&RN is really making a difference. Dr. Chaikov said the same thing to me, and I'm so proud of all of us at LE&RN, and I just wanted to say that. And now I'd like to switch gears and tell you some of my story. I've been incredibly fortunate to have survived cancer twice. Ovarian cancer since 2003, and breast cancer since 2012 when I had a double mastectomy. And more than the breast cancer, which I knew was in my future because my mother had had it, my aunt died of it, my niece had it a year after I had my ovarian cancer. And by the way, for those of you who want to do BRCA, it's not fail-safe. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. We were both negative, my niece and I, for both, and I've had both, so for what that's worth. More than anything, though, about breast cancer, I was really terrified about getting lymphedema because I'd seen my mother go through a radical mastectomy, and her arm swelled terribly. And this was back in the 70s, and I had no idea what lymphedema was. I didn't know why she had, developed this, and I didn't know what to do to help her. But I watched it break her spirit, and I really wish I could go back in time and help her at least manage it some. However, the lymphedema with which I was most familiar with was the burden of a man who I was involved with years ago. And by some miracle, he had survived fourth-stage melanoma. He developed lymphedema in that arm. He didn't take care of it because he'd had enough of doctors and hospitals, and that was unfortunate because his lymphedema was at the worst stage possible. His arm was like wood. His shoulder was pulled down by the lymph fluid in his arm, and sometimes it was so bad that the lymph just oozed out of his fingers. And because, again, I didn't know anything about lymphedema, and I saw that and I thought, God, I would never want to have that. I have to share with you, it was an extremely unhappy relationship without going into any details. So my great fear was that I would look down at my arm and see his. I didn't want that to happen. So when I talked to my surgeon, I told him the story, and I said, please, if the sentinel node is clear, will you get out? Just please don't take any more. And then when I went to my first checkup, I asked him, I said, how many lymph nodes did you take? And he said, 19 from your left armpit and 3 from your right. And I have to tell you, in 50 years of being in the entertainment industry, I have never expressed rage, frustration, tears in all my life. I was screaming and yelling in that room. My friend Billy was with me, my niece was with me, and somehow in the middle of all these people, I was alone. Nobody knew how I was feeling at that moment, and I had told them all so many times. And I remember just for the fraction of a second hearing this social worker's voice, and she was there, and she was trying to calm me down, and she said, just take a few breaths, and I turned and I looked at her, and for a moment I thought, I am going to choke this woman. If it's the last thing I do, I'm taking her with me. But my upbringing took over, and instead I just shoved everybody out of the way. I ran out of the building. I went down on the street. It was the middle of July in Los Angeles. It was sweltering. I still had my grenades in. I was still holding this pillow that they give you, to keep the drains in and stuff. And I didn't know where I was going. I was near the Beverly Center, I didn't have a credit card, so there was no way I could go shopping. I'm making fun of all this. It was really, really awful. And for a long time, I was incredibly bitter and angry. And I was telling, I think I was telling Drew today, and I didn't know what this was, and I don't know if it's really a medical thing, but this is what I was feeling when I was recovering in the hospital. Right after my surgery, I started to feel these little spots of pain in my fingers, in my hands, in my forearms, it was like a little lightning storm. And I thought, oh God, is this it? And it turned out that I did develop lymphedema. Now, let me be clear about this, okay? I'm incredibly grateful to my surgeons, because if not for them, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you. They saved my life. My doctor did cure me of cancer, and hopefully it's not going to come back. But I just wish they had prepared me for the lymphedema. I just wish they had told me about it so that I knew where to go. And let me tell you, I went to one of the best hospitals out there. You know that without me telling you. And I was astounded that not only did he not listen, but they were not prepared to deal with my questions about this. One of them finally got online, and they found this wonderful doctor, Dr. Emily Eicher, who practices in Santa Monica, and she really saved my life, both physically and mentally, and began my journey on the road to help. Still, at a fundraiser a couple of years ago, we were Bing Crosby's son, Harry. They were so lovely, weren't they? I talked to one of the doctors there, and I said, let me ask you something. Is there any way that maybe I could have done something, before surgery or whatever, to lessen this or lessen the impact? Is there anything I could have done? And he said, yes. And the party was really loud, and I couldn't hear him. And at that point, I thought, why did you ask him that? What is the point of knowing that now? You can't go back. You can't change anything. So I let it go, but I just wanted to weep. I thought, anyway. Emily introduced me to Bill, and as the national spokesperson for LE&RN over the last, 5.5, 6 years, I've lived with the fact that millions of us, invisible, remain undiagnosed for years, uneducated, or dismissive doctors have said to one of our members in Russia, be glad you have your arms and legs, get out of my office. Be happy. Bill and I went down to Washington to lobby, as he was telling you, and we went to meet the acting head of the CDC at the time because they were at the top of my list. I went onto the CDC website, and I was looking for lymphedema, and all I saw was filariasis, which of course is what most people know of as elephantiasis. They didn't have lymphedema on there. I thought, okay, I'm going to go to Atlanta. I'm just going to talk to those people down there. I'm just going to knock on the door and just walk on in there. Well, that didn't happen, but we got a chance to meet with her. And she did her presentation. Bill was there, Dr. Diane. And she sort of gave a cursory flip through with her PowerPoint or whether this is what we do, and this is disease, and this is breast cancer, and we do this other thing, and colon cancer, and whatever, and this infectious, that, and this other. And then Dr. Diane gave his beautiful presentation, and Bill. And I got so fired up. I said, can you just put a page up there on your website about us, about lymphedema, real lymphedema that we're dealing with in this country? And she said, well, you know, we really only focus on infectious diseases. And I just looked at her and I said, breast cancer is not infectious. Colon cancer is not infectious. And she sort of just looked at me, kind of like a deer caught in the headlights. And I'm so glad that you said she's going to help us now. I've had the opportunity to speak to researchers, physical therapists, journalists, television personalities. I got to tell you, Dr. Phil, no matter what you think of Dr. Phil, he is a righteous dude. I did an podcast. You have to put the I in front of that or not? Okay. So I did a podcast with him. And this guy researches everything. He doesn't just sit there and ask you questions. They're intelligent questions, or he'll talk about the disease himself. And I gave him a booklet, and we went in the house. We did it in his garage, you know. And then we went in to meet Robin, who was tiny. And I had given him a thing, and he was standing in the kitchen, and we were talking. I thought we were going to keep on. He was like this, reading all the stuff that I was giving him. And during the podcast, he said, we're going to bring out the Army. We're going to get behind this. And he said, let me tell you something about me. He said, I'm not a let's do lunch kind of guy in Hollywood. He said, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something. And so we're going to go be on his show, Dr. Roxon. I think we're Skyping Emma in. Emma, where are you? Where is she? Good Lord. We have to get you up here in a minute. Anyway, I'm really excited. He's a righteous dude. Sumner, don't be jealous. He's a righteous dude, and I know that he is going to help us. And anyway, let me see where I am in this thing. Oh, okay. So I've met all these people, right? But instead of writing speeches, this is my idea. See what you think about it. Okay. I want to kidnap. You know who I'm going to kidnap, don't you? I want to kidnap all of those doctors who, oh God, who say LE is no big deal. Yep, just cosmetic, water retention, not fatal. Well, I'm going to corner those guys. Well, I can't. I'd like to corner those guys, wrap their legs in 20-pound weights. Hold on, hold the phone. And force them to live like that for a week while they're tending to their patients, while they're making their rounds down those long, long hospital corridors. And then we'll have a talk about it. Seriously. And this is what Dr. Eicher said, and she has lymphedema in one leg. She said, they're not going to understand until they have it, or until someone they love has it. Because I think that an enterprising medical school, maybe like Harvard, maybe you guys could devise a rap for your young doctors when they're studying lymphedema, maybe in their arms or their legs, just for the classes. Seriously. It's kind of like baby think it over, right? It's draconian, but I think you really, seriously, I think you ought to maybe give it a try so they know what it feels like. Because there's no substitute for reality. And we, all of us who suffer from these diseases, we can't escape our limitations. And I think we even experience a kind of prejudice against those parts of our bodies that drag us down every day. We have to demur at tasks that we can see others easily accomplish, or we just fake it till we make it, right? And for example, This season on American Horror Story, I had to learn how to use a bullwhip. Yeah, they're always springing stuff like that on us over there. I gotta tell you, they told me at the beginning of the season that I was gonna be a robot. And halfway through they said, you're gonna be a Satanist. And I said, dudes, I am not praying to Satan. Okay? I've survived cancer twice and I'm not going there. Okay? And I told them that I wouldn't be able to bullwhip Evan Peters because of my lymphedema. And knowing me, knowing about my disability, I was sure that they would get it and you know, write it out, whatever they had to do. But on the morning that I came to shoot that scene, they called me in for a bullwhip lesson an hour before we started. And I imagined it would kind of be short and simple like a fake cat o' nine tails, right? But I walk out into the soundstage and there's this bullwhip dude. And he's all dressed in black, kind of like Johnny Cash. And he's got this 9-foot bullwhip. And the tassels at the end, he was so excited to tell me, well, that has a lethal velocity of 75 miles an hour. And I said, listen, man, I can't do this. I can't do this. I've got a problem with my arms, okay? And he said, no, I got it. Because he just wanted to show me his stuff, you know? And so I just gave up. And I put my compression sleeves on, and I thought, you know, I got to give it a go. So I figured out, he taught me how to wrap that thing around Evan's waist. He taught me how to crack it at the camera. And during the shooting, which took several hours, my dresser, I had my compression sleeve on my dresser, I had to push the arm, you know, the wristband up under my sleeve because it was showing under my costume. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was just focused on the scene. And when I took off my costume, I realized that my compression sleeve had cut off my circulation. And my arm, it was like, I don't know, it was like a turkey leg at Thanksgiving. And I'd never seen anything like it. I was by myself. I was terrified that I had done something so horrible that I couldn't reverse it. The veins were distended, and all I could do was put arnica on it and CBD ointment, which I highly recommend, even if it has a little THC in it. And it did the trick. Seriously, the next morning, everything was fine, but except for the heaviness and the swelling, and I had to go back to work. And when I got there, there was still so much fluid in my arm, I had to kind of tie it to a C-stand, you know, so that the fluid could drain down a little more. But it was so painful, and I finally said, I can't do this anymore. I got to go home. I got to go to bed. I just can't do this anymore. And I thought, you know, if I can't get through to people who I work with all the time, who love me and nod sympathetically when I tell them about lymphedema, I don't know, maybe I just bore them to death. But if I can't get through to them, how are we going to get through this wall of indifference? And I was absolutely exasperated. In wanting to acquiesce, I hurt myself, okay? Because I don't want to be thought of someone who can't do my job. I don't want to be thought of as disabled, and I don't want them to look at me and make a decision on their own based on what they think I can and cannot do. Because for me, I got to work. You know, I don't want to be thought of as old and infirm or whatever. Anyway, I made the point. Sorry. Only those of us in the room who really suffer from LE know what it's like to live with it. No one can understand what we face every day. We manage this, what I call souvenir, as a result of surviving cancer or being born with some kind of lymphatic disease. And despite all of the support that we receive from the people that love us and the caregivers, even they can't really understand. It can be so frustrating to maintain our self-care day after day after day, managing wrapping, compression garments, physical therapy, battle with insurance companies, hospital visits due to cellulitis. I got cellulitis in the arm I had the least number of nodes come out. And I went to, again, a wonderful hospital in LA, and they didn't know what the hell was going on. They brought an infectious disease doctor in there, and he put me on a vancomycin drip that sent me into fever and chills. They were packing me in ice one minute and blankets the next. I just thought they were trying to kill me. I just felt like it would have been better to go home and take an aspirin, like they usually tell you to do. And somebody asked me once, what do you want? I want a cure. But I want something more than that. I want a cure, not just a cure, but a cure that reverses lymphedema. That's what I want. And obviously, in the meantime, we have to go on living with this disease. So I believe that we need to use our imaginations to be free, to be at peace, to escape our bodies regularly and nourish our spirits and not just our affected limbs. Because they don't define us. They don't define me, and I'm not going to let them define me. And you shouldn't let them define you either. When I was going through chemo for ovarian cancer, my friend Lynn Redgrave, who was a truly fearless and gifted actress, whom I miss, was in the final stages of breast cancer, and I was trying to decide whether to drop out a film that I had promised to do, and she said, absolutely not, because for those hours on set, you get to be another woman. You can be a woman who doesn't have cancer. And she was right. So one of the things I want to talk about today, and I'm not going to be too much longer, but I want to talk about freedom. Freedom from a life sentence with no parole. At least not yet, anyway. And the freedom to enjoy our lives, spending our precious time and money on things that we truly enjoy and not on what we are forced to endure. Because wouldn't that be the goal? Isn't that what we all want? I mean, even the rest of humanity, I mean, oftentimes don't we all want to be free of the roles that we've been cast in this lifetime? I wanted to play characters and pretend to be other people from the moment I was born. My mother said when the doctor smacked me on my behind, I thought it was applause, and I've been looking for it ever since. Thanks, Mom. My sister Mary said the reason I went into this profession was because in plays and movies I know how the story comes out. And maybe I feel unsafe in the real world. And she might be right. Because my favorite heroine in dramatic literature is Blanche Dubois from A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. Because Blanche says, I don't want realism, I want magic. It's a mystery, even to us actors, why we are driven to investigate the lives of fictitious characters and to play dress up. All I know is that when I succeed in making the dialogue disappear and a real live human being take its place, and you and I forget that it's me, and that it's Annie Wilkes or Evelyn Couch or Dolores Claiborne, and for some reason, I don't know why this is true, but then I'm home. It's my true home. And as grateful as I am, though, for all of the success that I've had in my career, the only thing that has bothered me about my profession is the self-aggrandizing aspect of it. The shallow silliness, more and more of that lately. Nobodies who are famous for being famous. The infamous 15-minute idiots. Well, that's not what I signed up for. And for someone like myself who studied Greek theater at the university, and I understand the power that authentic catharsis has to change human hearts. The Greeks knew about it, and we have forgotten it in most cases. And it's been more and more difficult for me to stay in the game. But Mama's got to make the money. Through the process of educating myself about LE, I read emails from folks who suffer terribly, and I have been incredibly moved. Tragic stories of individuals who went without care and their condition worsened, yet so many have such grace in accepting what they're going through. I'll never forget this wonderful dancer, Pearl Ann Hines, and she developed lymphedema in one of her legs just as she was about to reap all the rewards of all of that practice, all of that sweat in the studio. And after she went through grieving, she wrote, "If I continued to ignore the reality, the legs of future generations would be lost." Or Emma Detlefson, who was born with lymphedema in both legs. In her 10 years, she has been hospitalized with cellulitis 9 times. And even so, Emma is, I think, our most vibrant advocate. Her mom, Tiffany, who is with us today, wrote of her daughter, quote, "She is a youth ambassador for LE&RN. She's been to more congressional meetings in DC than most people ever will. Just this past spring, she was named a Woman of Distinction at 10 years old." And one of 13 Kids Who Care, a local acknowledgement for kids doing great things in our area. But she doesn't really talk about it, and I think that's kind of amazing. She takes it in stride and she puts in the work because she's wise enough to know that if she wants to see a change, she has to work for it, and she has to do it herself. At 7 years old, when she became our youth ambassador, she wrote this wonderful speech, and the very last line, which has just stayed with me always, she said, and they have a 5K in New York, they go back and forth, across the Brooklyn Bridge, and she said, "If I can do something hard for me, like walk back and forth across the Brooklyn Bridge, maybe a smart scientist can do something hard for him and find a cure for this in my lifetime." The only thing I would change is you should put her in there. Okay? Just saying. And then, in a more somber way, there is John Shull, whose bride, Marianne, was struck down in her 20s with lymphedema that has steadily progressed, and it turns out that she has 4th-generation primary lymphedema, and she has spent years managing it in a full-body pump suit. And he writes, if you don't mind if I take a little more time and read the email. "We try not to discuss the cavalier attitude of the physicians that dismiss themselves from getting involved, but will say it's negligence and thwarted any hope for my bride. The callous behavior of people who stare at Marianne and project looks of disgust as though she is somehow neglectful towards herself and careless. We managed to get a referral to a lymphedema clinic and started a bandaging regimen, but discovered that the therapist knew less than us. We live in a remote part of Washington State, so after a few visits to the clinic, I took on the treatment because they felt she would have to remain in bandages for the rest of her life. At this point, Ellie had taken her youth and her self-esteem, but we agreed not to give in and continued the treatment, acquired a full-body pump and a long list of support stocking and toe caps. We literally squeezed out the fluid and broke down the fiber material, so after 3 years, we thought we had beat it. We were looking for real nylons and something that could make her feel good about herself. And then it all fell apart. Marianne came down with a viral infection in November of 2017, and by December, her leg began to swell from 37 centimeters to 55 centimeters. We went to healthcare provider and PT, and we were told, keep bandaging, it happens. You see, Marianne's LE keeps her from fighting the infection. She's constantly fighting infections, oral, respiratory, always. And by January, Marianne was short of breath, could no longer negotiate the stairs, and she couldn't have a good night's rest. In March, we were desperate, and we went on to have a CT scan and discovered she had been in AFib for some time. We had to rush her to the hospital. We were lucky and well taken care of, and she lost 45 pounds of fluid, but she is still in an AFib vest trying to get her blood thinners to work. He says, no, LE doesn't kill. It's like rheumatoid arthritis. It just eats away until you can't fight it anymore. If I were to address the doctors, I would say your oath is to do no harm. Recognize you have a bias, and that bias injures others. And this is what gets me. The grace that this man has after all he and his beloved have been and are still going through, John says, quote, "We have thought of you often and how hard you and the LE&RN family works for LE fighters. We would like to thank you for all your kind words and keen interest in our issues, but most of all, for all the good work you do for those who aren't as fortunate as we are. Our biggest concern is for all those men and women who are alone to fight it. I've been given many gifts, knowing what to do with my life, having the talent to pursue my dreams. My parents supported me, success in an industry where only a few succeed, and now my lymphedema is perhaps my greatest gift. I have a purpose now in the real world for the rest of my life. I can use my celebrity to help all of you, and I hope many, many, many others. And I believe it's a fallacy that people can't change. I know because I'm a completely different person than I was 8 years ago. By some miracle, I've managed to lose 70 pounds. As a result, my LE is less visible. I still have to wear compression sleeves. I'm still careful about hygiene. But I have to tell you, and you may not think of this to look at me, but I was a hermit for years. You know, I would say, yeah, I'll come, and then I'd turn them down at the last minute. I remember a friend coming into my house and looking at my dining room table. He said, "What a nice table. Where are the chairs?" They used to joke that I was Miss Havisham. But I have to tell you that Kathy no longer exists. And your courageous stories are directly responsible. I mean, that's the only way I can explain my transformation. Now I'm whole. I live and I work in two worlds, the magic and the real, imagination and science. Because imagination drives our scientific discoveries and makes our dreams come true. So I say, if you want to be healed, heal others. If you want to be whole, make others whole by your empathy and the respect you show them. Therein lies our freedom. My friend Joni Mitchell, I say if you're going to drop a name, drop a great one. She's turning 75 next week. I'm going to be there. Anyway, she says in her iconic song, Woodstock, "We are stardust. We are golden." Science agrees with her, and I do too. I believe stardust is the divine spark within all of us, and when we stop, and the operative verb there is stop, take the time to look into the eyes of another human being, to really listen and empathize. And then I believe, going back to my heroine Blanche Dubois, as she says, in those moments, sometimes there's God so quickly. Today in this moment, I am profoundly grateful for the opportunity to gather with you beings, you magnificent creatures made of stardust, to exchange our experience, our strength, and our hope. Our very first member of LE&RN, a man named Andrew Mata from Ontario in Canada, when we were beginning this journey, right, Bill, 5 years ago, I got an email from him, and he said, "We are about to change the world." And I say, We need everybody in this room to make that happen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.